Hey future weapon enthusiasts, I'm Nick Young, the CEO of Desert Tech, and I'm excited to share with you the testing that we've been doing comparing different fully automatic weapon systems. But before we get into it, please like and share the video. YouTube doesn't like this type of content like we do and like you do, so let's overcome the algorithm. So we're going to compare some submachine guns against assault rifles to determine how smooth the action is, what the controllability looks like, what are some of the dynamics of shooting them in fully automatic fire that is different between the systems. So shooting suppressed actually will and can induce more recoil and more movement, because with compensators and brakes you can diffuse the recoil, and you can also direct recoil forces to push the muzzle down to help with muzzle neutrality while you're shooting. So in the testing we wanted to run suppressors so that it was kind of a good baseline comparison where no rifle really had the advantage of having a custom tailored compensator or muzzle brake that would shine over something else. So here's the lineup. Shooting the HK MP5 SD at 9mm, we have a Holosun 507C mounted on a rear mount that replaces the rear sight. I really love this mount. It puts it at the perfect height to have your sight alignment as if you were looking down the irons. And I removed the front sight post in the front peep sight to stop that from obscuring the red dot. We're also running aftermarket 40-round magazines in an attempt to have as much ammunition fired in a full auto segment as possible. So I think this is probably the first time anyone's done a full auto controllability comparison between the FN-P90 and 5.7 and the MP5 SD and 9mm. The MP5 SD is known to be pretty much the most controllable submachine gun on earth, and it is a joy to shoot. So you'll get to see what the controllability comparison looks like. Shooting the FN-P90 and 5.7, it runs a 50-round magazine that feeds horizontally along the top. And it has a Desert Tech Detro red dot sight. I was also pretty anxious to see the controllability comparison between the Sabertooth Micron with 11.5-inch barrel and 5.56 to the FN 5.7 due to the size being very similar. So you can see here that we're looking at maybe 2.5 inches difference in length, noting that the Huxworks muzzle brake on the Micron is quite a lot longer than the standard flash hider. But maybe with a standard flash hider it might be more like 1.5 inches in difference in length. Unfortunately, I didn't have a silencer to put on the P90, so this is the only machine gun that we're not shooting suppressed. Shooting the Desert Tech Sabertooth Micron with 11.5-inch barrel and 5.56, we had it set up with a 60-round Surefire magazine, a Holosun red dot, a MAL laser illuminator system, and a Huxworks suppressor. Here's the size comparison between the Micron Sabertooth and the HK MP5 SD. So you can see the Micron is roughly 2 inches shorter than the MP5 SD, maybe 2.5 inches shorter, roughly 2 to 2.5 inches shorter. Here's another fun size comparison. You can see this is our Sabertooth 16-inch rifle next to the 9mm HK MP5 SD, and your difference in length is maybe 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches, very close in length. And so very cool setup with the bullpup compact system. Shooting the Sabertooth 5.56 with a 16-inch barrel, it was kitted out with a 60-round Surefire magazine, Holosun 507C red dot, a MAL laser illuminator, suppressor with a foregrip. Shooting the Desert Tech Infinity 16, we utilized the QMag 53 quad stack magazines that are 53 rounds. We had a Huxworks suppressor attached to the end of the barrel. We had a PAC 15 laser illuminator on the top, Surefire light on the side, touch pads on the left, and foregrip with open sights. So trying to simulate what would be used in service. So the results of the MP5 SD are, it is super fun to shoot, super controllable. The smoothness of the MP5 SD is attributed to the roller delayed system. It allows the bolt carrier to be pretty lightweight, and so you don't have a big chunky movement of that bolt carrier slamming back and forth inside of the gun. In addition to the vented suppressor system that brings the bullet's velocity to be subsonic every time, this is a pretty neat silent system. We did run into an issue during the first string of fire where the bottom half of the magazine was hollow point ammunition, top half of the magazine was ball ammunition, and once it got to the hollow point ammo, then it malfunctioned every shot. So I think it's due to the extra play in the aftermarket 40 round magazine. You can see how much that moves. I think it was just dipping too far forward. So here is a 30 round magazine, and we can see if the movement on that, well, you know, that's got a pretty decent amount of play too. And the interesting thing is I fired the same hollow point ammunition through my Canik rifle and my CZ-P10F, and it didn't have any malfunctions whatsoever. So I was quite surprised that we were having failures to feed every single shot with the HK MP5. Now, I only tested it in the 40 round magazine, and so it's possible that it's magazine related. Maybe it's moving just a little bit more than the 30 round magazine. So that was kind of a surprise. As far as fun to shoot, this is definitely off the charts fun, super controllable. I did find that in the initial burst of full auto that it did have a little bit of muzzle climb. You could feel that the weight of the bullet is really kind of why it did that, but it was very easy to bring it back down. And so one of the fun things we observed was the large diameter of the 9mm made it pretty easy to just drill a hole out into the target, and so that was pretty cool. In the future, it would be fun to do some burst fire comparisons between the full auto. This particular rifle has full auto, two-shot burst, single shot. In two-shot burst modes, when we were shooting it, you're getting two shots, maybe 2 to 3, maybe 4 inches apart, but you can keep it pretty tight. Shooting the Sabertooth 16-inch 5.56 rifle was as fun as shooting the MP5 SD. Controllability was off the charts. Groupability was on par with the MP5 SD, and between me and the other shooters, we felt like that this was by far the funnest gun to shoot, and we shot the most ammunition through this gun. Yeah, that's pretty good. That's about, yeah, that's less than half the size of the Micron group. In analyzing the group size, you can see the group size with this rifle is on par with the MP5 group sizes, and this is a 5.56, so that's pretty cool. The results of shooting our Sabertooth Micron with 11.5 inch barrel in full auto. This is pretty cool. I mean, it's fun to shoot. The actions on both Sabertooth rifles were very smooth, and the second smoothest running actions after the MP5 SD. Yeah, that's not too shabby for 5.56 with the 11.5 inch barrel. Yeah. The rate of fire changes because the follower in the Surefire magazine transitions to 2 columns, and yeah, so it changes the rate of fire because the pressure is different between the springs. As you observe the video through my glasses camera, you will note that I was able to keep it very stable during the initial firing, but then it started to kind of wander a little bit towards the end. So yeah, that's not too shabby for 5.56. The 60 round Surefire magazines worked pretty good if we were shooting brass case ammo. After we shot the videos, just for fun, we kept shooting these and we put some Wolf ammo in there. But the extra friction of the Wolf cases was a disaster in the Surefires. It didn't even run, and it locked up after 2-3 rounds. And we really couldn't get the Surefires to function at all with the Wolf ammo. Switching back to brass case, then they worked fine. It should be noted though that we shot the Wolf ammo through the Sabertooth rifles through a Lancer magazine, and we had 0 malfunctions. But the Wolf ammo really is pretty terrible as far as reliability. They really should polish the cases so that there's not so much friction as it's feeding from the magazine and feeding through the gun. Shooting the Infinity 16 was really fun. It was relatively controllable, but the extra accessories out in front definitely weighs the front of the gun down, and you can see in the groupings that the vertical rise was less with the more muzzle heavy system. However, we did have more horizontal movement, almost twice as much horizontal movement than with the Sabertooth rifles. Wow, that's pretty fun. The action on the Infinity 16 is not as smooth as the Sabertooth. It just feels less refined and a little bit more clunky feeling, but it was definitely a smoother operating action over the P90's blowback system. Shooting the FNP90 has always been disappointing to me. I've had this FNP90 for a couple years now, and every time I shoot it, I am very disappointed with the experience. And the main reason is the blowback action is very chunky. The cartridge itself is very low recoil, but that action clunking around inside of the gun jitters the rifle around a lot. Now, it's not impossible to control, but that chunky action hitting back and forth inside of the gun makes it much harder to control than the MP5SD, and the overall group size of the 5.7 was arguably the same or worse than some of the 5.56 groups. The other thing that I really didn't like about the gun was the trigger. So the operation of full auto in the FNP90 is you pull the trigger a little bit, it fires 1 round, you continue to pull the trigger further, then it goes into full auto. Now the force required to keep it in the full auto firing mode is pretty substantial. In the first burst group that I did, then I thought I was holding the trigger hard enough and far enough back, but apparently I wasn't, because it kept stopping the fully automatic fire and reverting back to single shot, and I'd have to pull the trigger again. Cut. So you can see in the video that unexpectedly the gun kept stopping in full auto, and initially I was like, what the heck? And realized that you just have to really crank on that trigger to keep it in full auto the whole burst group, which I think is really stupid, because it gives you the possibility of really not knowing what's going to happen as you fire the gun. As far as the P90 goes, I think this is one of the more innovative guns that's ever been made, primarily due to the horizontal magazine system. I quite like the magazine system and the downward eject system, but that's kind of where my likes end. I don't really care for the ergonomics of the gun. I do really like the compact size. I really hate the sight mounting options. And the ergonomics leave a lot to be desired. I think that if you took the magazine and essentially redesigned the whole gun, that it would be, you could make something that kicks this butt, you know, maybe do a roller delay system that gets rid of that chunky recoil back and forth. But like I said, I have never really enjoyed shooting this gun for the reasons stated. Shooting the Infinity 16 was more controllable than shooting the 11.5-inch Micron, but I did note that just the sheer short size of the system did open the group up a little bit as you observe the video through my camera. One thing that I think would help with being able to control the Micron better is having some type of a SD handguard that wraps around the suppressor. So this is a Black Label handguard, and the suppressor does fit inside this handguard. However, we've tried this in the past and it just gets really hot, and I don't like the amount of heat that transfers into the handguard. It gets super hot and it takes a long time to cool down. Ideally, it would be awesome to have some type of rubber covers wrapped around the handguard so that heat would not transfer into the handguard and burn your hands, similar to what the MP5 SD has. This is very insulative and doesn't ever get hot while you shoot it. This is an example of maybe what could be done around an SD, is to have rubberized M-LOK slot covers just inserted all the way around. This 16-inch barrel does not have the overheating issue into the handguard. I just wanted to see how much coverage we could get just putting these all over. So, and it covers pretty much the entire thing and simulates a rubberized handguard like the MP5 SD. But it does work. So if you want to do a suppressed Micron with the maximum controllability, doing some type of SD handguard would get you there. On our 5.56 rifles, we ran the Huxworks, I think it's called the Helix, and the suppressor works really great. The size is pretty small and the suppression is very acceptable. There is one thing that just drives me crazy that I hate about the suppressors, and that is if you have to remove the suppressor to put it on a different gun, you have to use a very large wrench here at the back, and because the size is so large, it requires a very large size wrench, and the width of the wrench is too big to get behind the suppressor. And so we only had one 5.56 Huxworks suppressor, so we had to change this out through all of the 5.56 rifles that we were shooting. And due to this stupid removal system on the can, then we essentially just had to try to fight it and muscle it off with our hands. And it was very frustrating, and we had to wait for long periods of time for the suppressor to get cool enough. And then it was, quite frankly, pretty difficult while it was hot to remove the can. Now, once it cooled off, it wasn't a big deal, but when it was hot, the thermal expansion was really just holding onto that brake really tight, which is great when you're shooting, but it's terrible when you need to take it off when the suppressor is warm. So Huxworks, please get rid of this nut at the back of the suppressor. Give us some kind of option at the front, some kind of a spanner wrench, so that we can get this sucker off when it's hot and switch rifles. I really want to immerse you guys into the shootability, the dynamics, and the comparability of the guns. Nobody is really focused on that. Everybody just takes the rifle out of the box, goes to the range, bang, 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 it works, and they don't show you the dynamics of the system, of the shootability, of the controllability. And so I hope you enjoyed the immersed experience to see what it's like behind each of these full auto rifles. And we got more content planned in the future. We're still gathering gear to do the head-to-head comparisons, so those are definitely still in the works. We have most of the stuff is here now. We're just still waiting on some things like the 6.8 ammo and whatnot. Anyways, this was a super fun test, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.